Talktainment Radio Worldwide South. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Alrighty, welcome to the best hour in radio from coast to coast and heard all the way around the world. This is TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, and you are in touch with the compensatory concept with my man, Mr. Neely Fuller. I'm the co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is radio the way it should be heard. We'll apologize up front for a little technical difficulty. That happens sometimes when you do live radio, but nevertheless, we are here and we are ready to go. And as usual, we will start off by saying, how are you, Mr. Fuller, and what's been going on?
I'm still learning. And what's been going on are a lot of things that should not be going on, and a lot of things maybe that should be going on. But a lot of things that shouldn't be going on is the dominant force among the people of the planet. Mm-hmm. To quote somebody, I think it was Charles Dickens, wrote a novel. It might have been Charles Dickens, I don't remember correctly. But I remember the quote. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you can say that about just about any time since people have been on the planet.
Yes. And with that being said, before we get into the calls and letters, and I have quite a few of them, and we're not going to get through them, I've noticed this week the uprising or what's been going on in the state of Indiana, and as far as I can tell, they came up with a marriage situation against homosexuals or the gay life. And I noticed that it seemed like a lot of corporate America, the NFL, a lot of states refused to do business with them. And as I begin to think about it, maybe I'm wrong, I am really soliciting your opinion on it. But I follow the code, and I see some usual, as you mentioned, the usual suspects emerging, such as confusion. That went right away. I'm interested in what your opinion is concerning, I guess, businesses in the state of Indiana with the, I guess, the right to discriminate if you are homosexual or gay. Before you answer, I just say that from what I understand about the code and what I feel, I don't like this in that I see it as a door opener to a lot of other stuff that's already going on, but giving them being the racist a right to do things that they're already doing. What is your opinion on that?
Well, it comes down to what are the laws governing a religion, and what are the laws governing the people who are not of that religion. And how do they interact with each other? This is something for, and I say we have one government, and that's the system of white supremacy. The white supremacists will have to make that decision, or they are making that decision, or they have made the decision, but it goes whichever way they want to take it. And so they have said that there's a separation of church and state. So I have heard that, and I have heard that for many, many years, but I've never understood exactly what the people who were saying it meant. So there's confusion right there. Separation of church and state. So let's get to definitions. What is a church and what is a state? I mean, we haven't gotten past that yet.
Mm-hmm.
So even before we get to the sexual orientation and all like that, if you say you have freedom of religion, and then you say you have freedom of people to do whatever they want to do sexually, as long as they are not encroaching on somebody, and then it comes down, when are you encroaching on somebody? When is the church encroaching on somebody? When is the state encroaching on somebody? When is somebody's sexuality encroaching on somebody? I would say that the way everything is going now under the system of white supremacy, the tentative logic that I haven't come to a conclusion yet, but the logic tells me that if you're going to have males marrying females, and you're saying that there's going to be a general degenderization of people, then along with that, if that's legal and if that's supposed to be supported, where's the cutoff line of what isn't supposed to be supported? What exactly is sex? See, we start getting into definitions, not only what is the church and what is the state, but what exactly is sex? Maybe there's no such thing as sex. Maybe it's all everybody's imagination. Maybe the church is everybody's imagination. Maybe the state is everybody's imagination, or anybody's imagination when it comes to any one of those three things: church, state, sex. Maybe none of it really exists. Maybe none of it should exist. And if it does exist, what does it all mean? How do people relate to each other through church, through state, through sexuality? Or maybe there is not supposed to be any relationship. But if you don't have any relationship between any of those three things, then what does its existence mean? Or should it exist? Church, state, sexuality? What are we really talking about here? And what are we really trying to ultimately accomplish? So that word that you used at the beginning of this conversation, very important word, confusion.
Yes, sir.
And you better believe whenever there's confusion in a system of white supremacy, the white supremacists are on their regular job.
You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTeamRadio.com. And if you would like to give us a call, you may by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. And after I vet the question, then I'll just put it in rotation, because trust me, we have more questions than we do shows. So I probably am not going to be able to get to it this week, but at some point in the shows or podcasts, we will. Before we go to the phone lines, I want to remind you that to make sure that you get the book. The book is called the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. It is a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. Now, you can get this book by going on the web to producejustice.com. Mr. Neely Fuller and his staff have made it real simple for you to get it. It's right there, and they even make sure and give you a tracking number so you can track when your book will get there. And there's also an additional workbook guide that you can get with it, which will, it's like a dictionary, as Mr. Fuller has pointed out, which will help you understand words. Words are very important. We started off by using the word confusion. You need to know what confusion is and really how it works. And a question came up to me earlier today, Mr. Fuller, asking or are you going to put the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept on tape or audiobooks?
Well, I've been thinking about doing that, but then that would interject me as a conveyor of the book. I prefer that people learn to read,
okay,
and then read the book. and then draw their own conclusions. And that's my preference.
Okay.
Now, why would I have that preference? And that is that people have a tendency to pay attention to individual persons. And then a person becomes some type of what some people call a cult, whatever that means. But the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept is to make each person his or her own leader.
Mm-hmm.
And black people, non-white people, have been taught under the white supremacists to always obey a leader. And then the white supremacists have always chosen what that leader is going to be. And this has stunted the individual non-white person's growth.
Okay.
And that's been the result of that, because then the white supremacist says, hey, you're frozen in time until your leader comes along and tells you what to do. And we will see to it that your leader always takes the form of somebody white.
Okay. All righty. Let's go to the phone lines, and let's go to caller number 1. Caller number 1, go ahead with your question for Mr. Neely Fuller.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, Mr. Fuller, I have 2 questions for you. As you always point out in the book, that words are very powerful. And I have noticed that certain words are very, they paralyze black people. They always want you to forgive, forget, and pray. And it seems like all those words just paralyze black people. And we always see, like, the young lady Monet Davis, apologizing for what racists have said. Like, the racists called her a slut, and she's a young girl, and she wound up apologizing, saying that she forgives him. Why black people always have to apologize or forgive for things that racists say?
Well, that's the choice that, people make. I say people make their choices, but I say that, first of all, they should know the truth about a situation. I try to do that with the book that I put out, the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, textbook, workbook for victims of racism. And my suggestion is just a book of suggestions directed to the individual person, is that you, first of all, try to find out what the truth is about everything, and then try to find out what are you supposed to be doing. Now, there are millions of things that people can be doing on the planet. People are capable of doing millions of things and have proven that they do millions of things. That's all of the people in a conglomerate on the planet. So everything comes down to, out of all the millions of things to do about anything that happens, what is the best thing to do about everything that comes up? Out of all the millions of choices that you might have, in some things it might be just 10 choices, not a million choices, but just 10. Some other things, it might be a choice of just 2 or 3. Other things, it might be hundreds of choices that you can make. But out of whatever the situation is, the code says, which is supposed to be following logic. When I say code, I just mean following the logic that came with the universe, cause and effect. What is the best thing to do about every situation that comes up? And what is the best thing to say? Now, if a person wants to offer an apology for someone else, that's their choice. But then, always look at cause and effect. If you do that, what's supposed to be the result? And a question might be raised. Is that the best thing for everybody to do, to apologize for everybody else's actions under all circumstances, regardless of what it is? It might be just some things you can apologize for somebody else's actions, and in other things you don't. But where's the dividing line? It all comes down to each individual person, and each individual person who does anything should be able to explain his or her actions. That way you don't get confusion. Now, I make my own suggestion about name calling, and that is anybody can call me any kind of name that they want to call me. Anytime, anywhere. In fact, they can write them on every wall. If whoever owns the wall will permit them to do so. Millions of names. Call Neely Fuller whatever you want to call him, because he said you can do that. He'll call himself what he wants to call himself, and he'll do that. So what am I saying when I do that? What kind of result am I expecting? I'm expecting the result that I most likely will get based on logic, and that is you can call me whatever you want to call me. I will call me whatever I want to call me, because I am not dependent on what you calling me to determine how I am going to act. That's it.
Okay. What is your second question, caller?
My second question would be as far as dealing with, I know you touch on it in the compensatory code book, law. Does it really make a difference? Should black people look for whether it's either civil or criminal matter? Should we look for black people to represent us as lawyers or white? Is there a difference in regards to that, Mr. Fuller?
Okay, thank you for your question.
The question is, should a black person have a white lawyer or a black one?
Yes, he said yes.
It depends on who can do the most to produce justice. That's it. That's the only criteria.
Who can?
See, we're always thinking about not the ultimate objective is to produce a product called justice, meaning guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. If you are trying not to be mistreated, there are white people who can see to it that you are not mistreated. They're in the best position. And sometimes, even if you have a black lawyer, the black lawyer will be working hard to keep you from being mistreated. But if a white person is going to make the final decision and that white person is a racist, that black lawyer is going to be overruled, which means you are going to be overruled, which means both of you have lost what you were trying to do, because the white supremacists have the bottom line anyway in any court anywhere on the planet that involves non-white people. The white supremacists will determine what will happen, either directly or indirectly. So it just depends on how that goes.
All righty. You're listening to the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainMenRadio.com. You'd like to join in, you can, 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Chances are I will not get to your question this week and maybe next week because we are overloaded with questions, but that's a good thing. But I will get to them. Question, Mr. Fuller. This is from Craig in Detroit. He says, in your opinion, here's two of them. In your opinion, do you think integration has confused black and non-white people more? And his second question, what do you find most frustrating about doing this work? You've been preaching and teaching non-white people for years, and it seems like we're not getting it. I appreciate your work and thank you, and I'm working on being less confused and more codified. Craig in Detroit.
Immigration, meaning non-white people, I guess, moving around from place to place. The white supremacists orchestrate all of that. And so it does affect non-white people, and it affects white people's thinking. But the white supremacists, who are among the white people, make the final decisions anyway about where any dark-skinned people are going to be anywhere on this planet at any given time. So if you have dark-skinned people coming among other dark-skinned people, and sometimes people will say, well, that's causing a problem. Well, you can't address them because you're already among the people, or you're where you are, because the white supremacists have decided that's where you're going to be. So if other non-white people come among non-white people who are already there in a place where there are already non-white people there, and then there's conflict between the non-white people who are there and the non-white people who just got there, that's the white supremacists saying, I'm going to put 15 people in a boat that has capacity for only 5. I'll make that analogy. And let you all fight it out. But you got to remember who did it. It's the white supremacists. So you try to minimize that conflict.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you find yourself in a room and you say, I had enough room in this room when I came in, but now there are other people coming in this room. A lot of them have dark skins just like I do, but they're filling up the room too. Now the room is getting crowded. Now what is this? So just like all crowded organisms, the white supremacists know this, they start fighting each other. All animals, all insects do that when it becomes too crowded. They go at each other. Why? Because it's too crowded. The white supremacists know that. They knew that would cause conflict.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so you try to minimize the conflict as much as you can and try to go at the white supremacists and say, give us some more space. It's too crowded in here, and you know it.
Mm-hmm. And he says, do you find, he said that you've been preaching and teaching non-white people for years, and it seems like we're not getting it. He says, what are you are you frustrated, most frustrated with this, or what?
If I'm frustrated, and I'm not so far, it would have to be frustration with myself.
Okay.
Why? Because it means I don't know how to do what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
That's all that is. In other words, I'm the one who's trying to do this. I'm trying to get non-white people to listen to my point of view, which I think is based on logic.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm trying to get non-white people, basically, when I say I'm really saying it's not really my point of view.
It's
that logic. Go to logic. I mean, tap into the logic that's all around you, cause and effect.
Mm-hmm. So could I interpret that as you're saying that you need to get better at what you're doing?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. That's my failure. If you're trying to talk to a person and the person doesn't understand what you're saying, that's your fault. I mean, you've got to figure out a way to get the person. Otherwise, what's your point in talking?
Yes, sir. Okay, good. You're listening to the Compensatory Concept here on TalkTameRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, heard from coast to coast and around the world, 1-877-932-9766. Okay, let's go to line number 2. What is your call for Mr. Neely? Oh, no, excuse me, line number 3. What is your call for Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr.?
Yes, good morning. I recently purchased the Word Guide, and I found it very helpful, and it is rather large. It's larger than the actual book, so that surprised me. My question is, I hang out with a group of people who classify themselves as white, Hispanic, and Asian, and I recently engaged in a conversation with them about white supremacy. And when I brought up the term white supremacy, I initially got a visceral reaction from the people who were white when I used that term, and they say that they are not white supremacists. But when I came back to the group and I used the term European supremacy, they sort of had a different reaction, and they also said that they didn't think anything was wrong with European people being dominant over the world or being the smartest people in the world. So that was my question. Do you see the term white supremacy having a confrontational reaction when you say it to people who classify themselves as white?
Yes, because I have found from observation, from trial and error, that most white people resent the use of that term. It makes white people very uncomfortable. And why does it? I use the term. Why does it? Because it's true. That's why. That's not a comfort level term. White supremacy is racism, and racism is white supremacy. When you say that, sometimes non-white people become a little uneasy. Why? Because we all, in the system of white supremacy, have serious problems with the truth, both white people and non-white people. The truth is scary. It's actually terrifying when you start using words that just reveal the truth just like it is, with no sugarcoating on it, straight up. But when you say European, what does that mean? You know, what is the word Europe means? If you look in a dictionary, the standard dictionary, it says what? It says something very vague, like a European person is a person who is, you know, in a place that's called Europe that's really a continent. That's not really a continent, or maybe a continent, but it's called part of the Eurasian continent. And what is a continent? And now you got what? You got confusion. So as long as you have a confusion word, most people, white and non-white, because we're used to confusion, will settle in on that. We're very comfortable with confusion. So I'm not surprised at a white person saying, oh, if you say European, well, that's not the same as white supremacy. And it isn't. They're telling the truth there, because white supremacy is white supremacy. It has nothing to do with Europeans. Why? There are a lot in a place. People say that Europe is a place. There are a lot of non-white people who are born and, quote, unquote, raised in a place called what? Europe. So there you got confusion when you say European domination. And these non-white people in London are not dominating anybody. They're trying to get jobs. Truth be told. Boom. Again.
Wow. All right, caller. Thank you. Thank you for your call. We appreciate that. If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can, 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and I will vet your communication, and chances are I'm not going to get to it this week or maybe next week because, trust me, we are loaded with questions. So we'll give you you can email me, so we'll see. Okay, talktameadradio.com, and you can check us out on WCRS FM 98.3 Wednesday and Sunday evenings. Blogs and podcasts are available. Download the Talk Tame It Radio app to your cell or tablet. We go where you go, radio the way it should be heard. And before we go to break, Mr. Fuller, could you just speak to your book again, the title of it, and where we can get it?
Well, I usually give the subtitle. The loose title is called The Code, the Counter-Racist Code. But it's a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of white supremacy. And you can get it by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And the method for ordering will come up on the screen.
Okay. And as far as that question was asked earlier and answered earlier, you're not going to do an audio cassette an audio version of the book.
I've been steering away from that.
Yes.
Right.
And the reason
because
is
you can do too many things with audios, too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that answered that question there. Okay, let's see here. Are we going to go to the break? Okay, go ahead, yeah. All righty. Coming up next, we're going to have more of your questions via the email for Mr. Fuller and more calls. All right. On the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. heard exclusively on TalkTameItRadio.com. That is radio the way it should be heard.
TalkTameItRadio.com is the premier internet radio platform offering 40-plus talk radio-style programs professionally produced, optimized for online distribution, featuring Columbus, Ohio on-air personalities. TalkTameItRadio.com offers listeners diverse programming options covering topics such as arts and culture, love, life and relationships, technology, religion, paranormal activities, local and national politics, women's issues, alongside health and wellness. Listeners can access their favorite TalkTameItRadio.com programs free of cost through the website. Download the TTR app to your cell phone and you can take us wherever you go. We have programs on demand to fit your schedule through our podcast. The address is talktainmentradio.com.
Do you own property? Are you considering a seller financing option? Do you know the latest laws and regulations impacting seller financing? The National Real Estate Investors Association is working on these issues and has information available for those considering this option at nationalreia.com. That's www.nationalreia.com.
We can give you a new heart.
We can help you walk again.
We can perform brain surgery.
We can treat a sore throat.
We can bring life into the world.
We can work so many miracles, but the one thing we cannot do is read your mind.
When you communicate with your doctor,
when you ask us more questions,
you reduce your risk of suffering a medical mistake.
Tens of thousands of lives are lost every year due to medical mistakes.
The healthcare community is working on it, but you can help.
Please, open up. Ask more questions.
What are the side effects?
When should I expect my test results?
Will this medication interact with my other prescriptions?
We can't answer if you don't ask.
Help reduce your risk.
Questions are the answer.
Learn the 10 questions you must ask. Visit www.ahrq.gov. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, and the Ad Council.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. I encourage you to learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
Brought to you by Autism Speaks, the Ad Council, and TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
Goodwill is a global social services enterprise and the leading nonprofit provider of job training programs and career services in the United States and Canada. To pay for its program, Goodwill sells donated clothes and other household items in more than 2,700 stores and online at shopgoodwill.com. Goodwill uses the revenue earned from these sales to fund job training, employment placement services, and other community programs. The goal of the campaign is to increase goods donations to Goodwill, inspire an emotional connection to the Goodwill brand, and to elevate preference for Goodwill.
Supporting minority education. I'm Sean Booker, dammit, from the Melting Pot. I'm here to tell you that as the mother of a high school senior, I know due to financial circumstances, many of America's deserving minority students do not have access to a college education. Since 1944, the United Negro College Fund has sought to provide one. Since 1972, the beginning of this campaign, UNCF has helped more than 300,000 talented students earn a college degree. I'm Sean Booker, dammit. Give a helping hand.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Go ahead. Make my day.
You got the power.
Alrighty, welcome back to TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. And that's radio the way it should be heard. This is Mr. Bobby, and you're listening to the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. And, of course, if you would like to get in contact with the show, you may by calling 1-877-932-9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. And I'm not going to be able to get to your question today, but sometime in the future, you can. I will get to that question. And speaking on that, since we had a little technical glitch before the show started, we're going to cut off at our regular time at 11 o'clock. However, We are still going to be on for the additional minutes. I think it's 3 or 4 minutes, and you can pick those up on the podcast, and then we will have our regular closing on there. So don't be alarmed. The show will continue on the podcast because we want you to get the full hour. So we're going to cut off at our regular time, which is 11 o'clock, but the show can be heard in its entirety on the podcast due to a technical difficulty at the beginning of the show. Okay, let's go to the question. This is from Bajan San. He says, Mr. Fuller, I'm studying both of your books. Almost 100 years ago, Lathrop Stoddard wrote a book entitled The Rising Tide of Color, The Threat Against White World Supremacy. First of all, he asks, are you familiar with the author? Are you familiar with it? And then he says the author identifies 2 threats to white supremacy as being, number 1, wars between whites, such as World War I, and number 2, when non-whites start questioning white solidarity and begin to lessen their fear and respect of white power or white culture. Is this true? If so, how can the process of questions and answers help to demystify the great facade of white supremacy and lead to united independent action?
Well, I don't know about the World War thing, but I do believe that all activities since the beginning of white supremacy have resulted finally in the nourishing of the system of white supremacy, which is why we still have it ever since it began. I don't know when it really started. A lot of people have debated that. I don't, because I simply don't know. I have no idea. But anything that people put together, now this is a logical conclusion I've come to based on logic. Anything people put together, people can take apart. The system of white supremacy is put together by people. So it's just a matter of, first of all, knowing that it exists, knowing how this is put together, and then you study how something is put together, and then you study the best way to go about taking it apart. Now, what sustains the system of white supremacy is deception and direct violence. Deception is a form of indirect violence. When someone is deceiving you, fooling you, to your detriment, and naturally you won't know when somebody's fooling you because you're being fooled. And they're trying to harm you by doing so. It's not like playing a game with a child or something like that. They are playing a game with a child, but it's a deadly game. The white supremacists, that is, and the non-white people are the children, okay? So we are under their tutelage. We are under their domination. And they keep us fooled, okay, in every area of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And how do you fool people? Through deception. In other words, you make things look like they are not. That's all it is, a very simple formula. Always doing something, to throw people off balance in their thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That way you can always control them.
Okay.
Now, when they get to the place where you can't fool them, then they get violent, directly violent. But they don't get violence to the extent that they actually wipe out the people that they're dominating.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you wipe out the people, if you eliminate all the people that you're dominating, you're no longer in the business of white supremacy. So they are faced with that dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
That rising tide of color. I am somewhat familiar with the book. It has been a long time since I glanced at it.
Yes.
I do have it.
Okay. He says, and he air quoted this, he said, well, if this is true, then, air quote, how can the process of question and answers help demystify the great facade of white supremacy and lead to united independent action?
Because all problems throughout since the beginning of time, based on logic, all problems without exception are based on the process of questions and answers. They are solved. The problem solving, that is through the process of questions and answers. Questions and answers, unlimited questions and answers. What the white supremacists have done and they do this with a slave, and white supremacy is slavery, is that you stifle people when they start asking questions. You divert their attention to something else, and then get them to start making statements. When people start making statements, they're not asking questions, which means they're basically, if they have a problem, they're not solving problems either. Okay? So what the white supremacists do is divert your attention away from asking question after question after question. That's their standard technique. So what you do is persist in asking questions.
Okay.
Because that will unravel what they're trying to hide.
So you keep on being persistent in asking questions. Okay,
Yes.
I got you. Okay, and for our brother, and hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he will get me together. Thank you. That is Brother Shah Peace Biala. I think we addressed it, Mr. Fuller addressed it earlier when he said that he probably will not be converting his product into an audio well, he didn't say video, but I'm assuming that, Mr. Fuller, you're not going to do if you're not going to do an audio form of a book, you're not going to also do a video. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I've been staying away from videos because I'm trying to get people to focus not on individual persons.
Yes, sir.
Except the individual person that is him or herself.
Yes, sir.
Because if you solve the problems of the individual person, each individual person on the planet, you have solved everybody's problem. If everybody knows what to do and say at any given time and follow that code, everybody on the planet following a code that takes them right where they need to go in every area of activity, everybody winds up where they need to be because each and every person becomes his or her own leader. The white supremacists like to appoint leaders for black people, and then they build them up and then tear them down. And then black people wait for another 50 years until they build up somebody else and then watch them get torn down. And on and on and on. And the white supremacists just sit back and laugh.
Yes.
Because they see the whole concept is flawed. See, they can take out a leader anytime they get ready. There's some leaders strutting around, waving from balconies and all like that. I mean, once you find yourself in that position and you think that you're the leader of black people, I mean, you are actually in a very, 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 very vulnerable position.
Very.
You're just as weak as you can be and don't even know it.
All righty. And before we go to the phone lines, just a line from Mary Tehuti. She says that she was I'm inspired by you to produce, and she has a YouTube site, which I'm not permitted to give at this particular time, but she did say this: peace, good health, and prosperity to Mr. Fuller, you, and each and every one. I'm grateful for the blessing. A system of justice will be better than what we have. Thank you, Mary. Okay, let's go to line number 1. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, you are on with Mr. Neely Fuller. What is your question?
Greetings. Mr. Fuller, what do you suggest a black person do to protect themselves on the job when a coworker does not directly address a concern they have against them, but rather they later address it in a meeting where that black person is not present?
I didn't quite get the last part of the question. I heard a part about what do you do on a job.
Yes. So, like a coworker, they have a concern with a black person, but they do not directly tell the black person, but they bring up the issue in a meeting where that black person is not present.
Oh, well, I didn't get all of the question, but I will say this broadly speaking.
Yeah.
In job situations in the system of white supremacy, first of all, there's no such thing as a black person in charge. So, taking that into consideration, you always ask the classic question, where is your leader? Because every black person has a leader on this planet, and that leader is always white. That's the premise of white supremacy. You know, black people can go back and forth on the job, back and forth on the parking lot, and all like that. But at the end of the day, beginning of the day and the end of the day, it always comes down to, well, both of us are standing here trying to argue about who says when it's quitting time. What does the white supremacist say? because that's your bottom line. You're going to always be dealing directly or indirectly with the white supremacists. There's no point in arguing with a black person. Do not argue with a black person on a job about anything. He or she is not in charge of anything. You got to find out who is it that's in charge of him or her, because that's who you're dealing with.
Okay. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTainmenTRadio.com. If you'd like to get the book, you can, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook a workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. And you can get it by going online to producejustice.com, and everything is right there for you, no problem. And have your credit card ready, and I'm telling you, it's right there. I got my copy right in front of me so that if somebody wants to do a direct quote from the book, I can go to the page and see it for myself now. So, yeah, that's good. Before we go to the phone lines, and maybe Mr. Fuller, you address this. He says, hi, Mr. Bobby and Neely Fuller Jr. My name is, I'm Tony Mack, calling from Houston, Texas. My question for Mr. Fuller is, would a person be under white supremacy if he or she has, quote and unquote, a good job, nice house, and a car? Thanks. I enjoy your show every Wednesday at work. All right, Mr. Tony, we're going to ask Mr. Fuller, would he address that?
If the person is non-white, the answer is yes. That's what white supremacy means. Supreme. Supreme means supreme in every move you make. You don't make a move without their permission. And if you make a move without their permission, you'll hear from them if they didn't directly or indirectly give you permission. If you have a house or a car, the white supremacists gave you permission to have a house or a car if you're black. You don't have a house or a car or anything else because you don't have yourself. You don't have a family. A black person who says, my family, that's not your family. Your family is owned, just like you're owned by the white supremacists. Now, that statement that Neely Fuller just made is either true or false. You don't own anybody. You are owned by everybody who's a white supremacist. It just doesn't look like it on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
You have permission to breathe from the white supremacists because they can cut your breath off anytime they want to.
Anytime.
Poison the air or whatever. You won't know what hit you.
Okay. Don't forget now, the show is going to cut off at its regular time at 11 o'clock. However, we are going to continue for about 3 or 4 minutes in the podcast section because we want to make sure that you get all of the shows. So even though we're going to cut off on the air globally, it still will be on podcast if you care to do that. Okay, let's go to phone lines. Line number 3. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.?
Hello, good morning. My name is CJ from Miami Beach, and my question, well, first, thank you, Mr. Fuller, for this radio show and your book and your handbook. My question to you is, will you offer your books and handbooks on an e-book format, in an e-book format, and possibly offer it on iBook, Apple iTunes, because I'm an Apple user? That's my question to you. Good day. Thank you.
No, I have not authorized an e-book that's anywhere. Now, people have said they have seen the book through some type of electronic presentation or something. I'm not familiar with that at all, but whoever is doing it, I have not authorized that. The book is in print, and that's the way I want it. I prefer it to be that way.
Yes.
Because there are too many things that are going on that the white supremacists are doing.
Yes.
And they are beginning to take an interest because more and more, a few, not as many as I'd like, a few non-white people throughout the world are taking an interest in the compensatory code, the textbook, and the things that are in it, and the things that I say in it. And that means that it's getting the attention now of some people who are white supremacists. and they know how to manipulate a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just later on, I guess they will manipulate what I have in print, okay? But they haven't started doing that yet because they don't consider me to be that important.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason it hadn't happened. They do not consider Neely Fuller, who's he? I mean, nobody's paying attention to him at all.
But they are looking and they are listening. And trust me when I say that, and I say that directly because they are listening. And I have the evidence that they are listening to what Mr. Fuller has to say. And I'm glad you addressed it, Mr. Fuller, because a lot of people don't know that some of your works are trying to be sabotaged by people who want to pervert the great work that you're doing. And but I know your focus is to open up our eyes to what is really going on, and that's why you take the focus off you and put it on the book
and the concept.
And the concept, yes, sir. Thank you.
Because if what I'm doing becomes effective, you better believe I, as an individual, I'm going to be out of business. If I'm really effective in what I'm trying to do, the white supremacists will get rid of me in a heartbeat.
Yes, sir.
And they know how to do it and can do it.
And can do it.
So I already know that.
Yes, sir.
See what I mean? So that goes with the territory.
I'm so happy that you addressed that. Okay, this question comes from Robin Aziz. She says, Mr. Fuller, I understand what racism is and how it works. I have a dilemma about which school to send my offspring to next year. It is crucial for my son to understand who he is as a black person growing up in a racist society. It is also important that he learns how to do mathematics and other subjects. But nowadays it is a difficult decision in what school should I send my son to? Should it be a mostly non-white school where in most cases they are severely underfunded and overcrowded? Or should I send him to a predominantly white school where he would probably be ignored and mistreated in some cases? In short, what I'm asking is, are white schools bad for black children?
All schools are dominated by the white supremacists, if there are schools at all that have any power. That's everywhere on the planet. The white supremacists have seen to that. What you do is try to weave your way into whatever situation that your son can learn the most. And that might mean a so-called white setting. It might mean a so-called mixed setting. It might mean a so-called all-black setting. You have to pick and choose, just like when you learn anything, just walking down the street. You know, if you got a lot of chaos going on that street and whatnot, and you're trying to study something, I mean, and the chaos is intruding on what you're trying to study, then you have to move to another street. That's just the way it is. There's no way for me to actually say where it will be, because I don't know. The white supremacists see to it that nobody knows. I mean, it's just a guessing game. It's a roulette wheel. So you learn what you can wherever you can, but always with it in mind, and this is something your son must always know, that wherever he is, it's the white supremacists who are in charge of it. Whatever he's learning, it's the white supremacists who is in charge of that. And they are teaching even something that's going to always be supportive of white supremacy. But knowing this, you try to read between all of these lines. You have to go in. I always say, go in and take my book with you. All right? And then you have some idea about what all that chaos is all about. And you try to learn as much as you can in the chaotic situation that you're likely to be in. But if you get in a pristine situation, because every now and then the white supremacists say, well, we'll let a few of these black people in and let them learn a whole lot of math and science and all like that, because they are not politically astute anyway. They don't know anything about white supremacy.
Yes.
So we'll take care of that later, but we'll let them learn just enough math and science to carry out our bidding when we send them somewhere in the world where they can be among people whom we want them to learn math and science. See, it's always what they want you to learn, but you always do whatever you do with that understanding. That's the main thing.
That's
why I say if you don't understand white supremacy, everything else will confuse you.
Yes, what it is and how it works.
Right.
Yes. Okay. All righty. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can by email me, 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and then I will have an opportunity, hopefully, to vet the question and put it on. I won't get it on at this time. And remember that the show is going to cut off at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, but it will continue in podcast for the 3 or 4 minutes that we were delayed in the opening. This question comes from Salathiel, and he says, I'm a student of Neely Fuller and of Amos Wilson. I don't know who that is, but anyway. Mr. Fuller always says logic came with the universe. Being the case, white supremacists are aware of logic and use it, in parentheses, because they are the smartest people on the earth, end of parentheses. So how is it that we even have a chance of changing their ideal of logic when it seems logical in white supremacist mind to dominate black people? And then he says, in parentheses, all non-white people. So why don't we use the compensatory code to focus on black people living better, smarter, and more thought-provoking lives to live alongside white people, or all people, and at times defend blacks or attack the white supremacy when threatened, or the possibility of future threats, instead of seeking Neely Fuller's definition of justice with white people? Thank you. And this comes from Salathiel.
Well, I think if a person reads my book, the textbook for victims of white supremacy, the code is supposed to be a problem solver, because that's all it's about. Rather than chopping it up about, going here and going there and doing this and doing that, and some people even say resurrect a number of Black Wall Streets and all like that. No. Everything that you do, everything that you think about doing, is supposed to be geared to eliminating racism and replacing it with justice. Now, what is justice? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's really what it's all about. And guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help, whether that person is white or non-white. That's how you settle a race issue. And every black person, every non-white person on the planet is supposed to be thinking about and trying to do and say all the things that will bring that about every minute of every day that he or she is on the planet. That's it, regardless of what the white supremacist plans are, because the white supremacists, as long as they are white supremacists, their plans are to maintain white supremacy. So that means a head-on collision there. But ultimately it means they have to back down, or we're going to have Armageddon. Okay, that's an option which the white supremacists can choose to have right now. But you're supposed to be forcing them to have to make that decision, either to go along with the production of justice or kill all of the non-white people on this planet. And we tell them that. That's what I recommend. Mm-hmm. The first talk that I made, University of Maryland, 1969, I said, this is a decision that should be made sooner or later. Why prolong the agony? Either do justice or do the thing, since you have the muscle, while you can, kill all the non-white people on the planet and then explain it to your creator, because we won't be here to explain it to. Very simple. Either or. Take your choice, because our duty is to keep pushing until justice prevails.
Yes, sir.
They can keep pushing until white supremacy prevails, unless they decide to change. But that's their choice. We're supposed to keep doing what we're doing, even if we perish in the process. That's the theory, because that's the only logical way out of this.
Mm-hmm. I see that. Well, for Donovan, Lamont, Edward Tate, fundraiser for Craig in Detroit, we are not going to be able to get to your questions this week. However, we will definitely make an attempt to do it next week. But we do want to thank you for your calls and also for your emails. And again, producejustice.com is where you can get the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, which is white supremacy. To Mr. Fuller and to all of you, thank you, and we'll see you next week.